As you settle into this moment, letting your body sink deeper into comfort, allow yourself to release the weight of the day. Carl Jung understood something profound about the night. He knew that darkness isn't something to fear, but a sacred space where transformation begins. He called it the night sea journey, that passage through the depths of our unconscious where the soul does its deepest work. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, you're not just resting your body. You're entering that ancient realm where healing happens in silence, where the noise of the world fades, and your inner wisdom can finally speak. There's no need to fight for consciousness here. No need to stay alert or prove anything. This is your time to dissolve, to let go, to trust the natural rhythm of your being. Jung believed that in sleep, we return to the source, to that primordial darkness where all growth begins. Like seeds buried in winter soil, we need this darkness to transform. So, breathe. Slowly, deeply, knowing that even as you rest, even as you let consciousness slip away, something profound is happening within you. The journey you're about to hear isn't just words. It's a companion for your descent into rest. Let it wash over you. Let it guide you gently into that space where you no longer need to hold on to anything. Because sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply let go and trust. The wisdom of sleep. There are phases in life when you feel like you're climbing a mountain covered in fog. No one beside you, no one cheering, no one watching. You keep walking, keep trying, keep honoring your promise to yourself. Yet the world outside seems hauntingly silent. No one says, "I'm proud of you." No one sees the silent battles you've fought, and sometimes you ask yourself, is it worth it when no one witnesses it? But it's precisely in that solitude where another kind of strength begins to form. A strength that doesn't need praise or validation. Carl Jung once said that every rebirth begins with dissolution. When there's no one left to lean on, it's not the end. It's a sign that your soul is preparing to enter a new stage where you become your own source of power. In today's video, we will walk through that journey. The 7 steps to rise, even when no one is by your side. It's in the moment you stop waiting for someone to lift you up that you discover a profound truth. Everything you've ever sought in the outer world, strength, love, peace, has always been within you, waiting to be awakened. And when that happens, you don't just rise, you begin to walk with your own light. Number 1. Loneliness, the silent teacher of strength. There are moments in life when the world seems to pull away. Familiar conversations no longer excite you. People who once walked with you begin to feel distant. Everything on the surface stays the same. Your job, your relationships. Yet, inside you know something is changing. No one tells you this is the beginning of growth, because most people are afraid of this stage. But for Carl Jung, this is the first sign of the night sea journey, the dark night of the soul, when you no longer resonate with the old world. And to step into the new, you must pass through your deepest shadow, loneliness. The loneliness Jung spoke of is not about being physically alone in an empty room. It's the feeling of being disconnected from everything that once made you feel you belonged. You still smile, still talk, but deep down you know what's happening around you no longer touches your soul. The world seems to speak a language you no longer understand, and you're left with only yourself. Many believe that reaching this point means failure, but in truth, it's the moment your soul begins to separate from the persona, the mask that once helped you fit in. The feeling that no one understands me isn't a sign you've lost your way. It's proof that you're getting closer to your true self. Jung believed that a person only truly matures when they dare to face themselves in solitude. Not when someone listens, but when every external sound goes silent, and you're forced to hear your inner voice. During this stage, many lose direction and run away into work, relationships, distractions that help them forget the emptiness. But the more they avoid it, the larger that emptiness grows. Loneliness doesn't come to punish you. It comes to deepen you, to help you rebuild your foundation from within. I once knew a woman who, after her divorce, fell into a state of disorientation. She had always been surrounded by friends and laughter, but when everything collapsed, her apartment became frighteningly quiet. Instead of filling the void with dates or work, she learned to sit in silence. At first, just for a few minutes, then gradually for hours. She cooked for herself, read, journaled, and faced the questions she had always avoided. Months later, she said, "I realize silence is no longer my enemy. It's where I finally hear myself." That was what Jung called the meeting with the self. The moment you stop running and start coming home. When there's no one to depend on, that pressure forces you to develop discipline and inner steadiness. Like a climber without a safety rope, every step becomes a conscious choice, every action a promise to yourself. And each promise kept becomes a brick that builds your strength. Loneliness doesn't come to make you weak. It comes to make you unshakable. It's the gym of the soul where your essence is forged into steel. Looking back, you'll see that those quiet months were when you were strongest. The image of an oak tree in winter always reminds me of that. When every other tree sheds its leaves, the oak stands alone in the cold wind. No flowers, no color. But during that winter, its roots are growing deeper, preparing for spring. Humans are the same. Every lonely season is the soul's winter. But if you're patient enough to stay, you will see that spring is waiting behind it. Jung once said, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order." If you're standing in the darkness of loneliness, don't be afraid. It's not a sign of weakness. It's proof that you're leaving the old path to open a new one. Because the soul to be reborn must first dissolve. And only when the world is silent can you hear the voice within whisper, "It's time to rise." Remember, no one is coming to lift you up. But that's not bad news, because in that very moment, true strength is born. No one can give you resilience, but loneliness will teach you how to forge it. Every time you make it through a long night, you're not just overcoming fear, you're rewriting your story. Number 2. Stop seeking emotional comfort from others. At some point, after learning to stand in solitude, you realize something profound. What exhausts us isn't loneliness. It's expecting someone else to fill it. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that matter most." When you rely on others to make you feel okay, every silence, withdrawal, or unmet response feels like collapse. That isn't love. It's emotional dependency, which Jung saw as the mark of an unintegrated ego. After the stage of the lonely warrior, the next lesson is to learn how to soothe yourself. When you stop seeking reassurance and approval from the outside, that's when the self begins to take over. I once met a woman in a group therapy session. She confessed that she nearly panicked whenever her boyfriend didn't reply to her texts. She would check her phone dozens of times, imagining the worst. "I know it's irrational," she said, "but when he's silent, I feel like I don't exist." After months of therapy, she discovered the fear didn't come from him. It came from her childhood. Whenever she was sad, her parents would say, "Don't be dramatic or walk away." Her unconscious learned, "Your feelings don't matter." And ever since, she sought someone to prove otherwise. Jung called that the trap of emotional projection. When we use others as mirrors to determine our worth, when they respond, we feel valuable. When they withdraw, we lose direction. But the truth is, no one can be your savior forever. The more you depend on others for stability, the more you lose the ability to regulate yourself. Self-soothing doesn't mean coldness or disconnection. It means becoming the one who listens to your own emotions. When sadness arises, instead of running to find someone to calm it, you stay, place your hand on your heart, and whisper, "I'm still here." That simple act is the beginning of emotional independence, a key stage of individuation when you stop merging with the collective and become an autonomous self. A person who knows how to comfort themselves doesn't need constant responses to feel valuable. They don't need instant replies or compliments to keep going. They can sit quietly in a cafe enjoying their coffee alone, feeling complete in that moment. That's not coldness. It's the highest form of freedom. Freedom from the need to be validated. Jung said that all forms of dependence are the shadow of love. We call it attachment, but it's really fear of abandonment. The immature ego craves someone to confirm its worthiness. But when you look deeply into that fear, you realize it's not emptiness. It's an invitation to become the parent you once needed but never had. And then you understand what you thought you needed someone else to help you survive. You've had the power to do all along. In modern psychology, this is called emotional independence. It's not rejecting love or connection. It's refusing to hand over control of your emotions to anyone else. You still love, still connect, but you don't lose yourself when relationships change. When someone leaves, you grieve, but you don't collapse. When someone goes silent, you listen, but you don't lose your worth. Someone with emotional independence doesn't need a rescuer. They can lift themselves up, wipe their own tears, and keep walking. And only from that place can they love truly, not out of need, but out of choice. Perhaps that's what Jung meant when he said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Because when you stop seeking comfort from others, you start seeing your own power. A power that doesn't depend, doesn't borrow, and can't be taken away. From the moment you stop waiting for someone else to make you happy, you begin to grow up. And if you're in that stage, no one understands, no one comforts, no one lifts you up. Remember, it's okay. No one coming doesn't mean you're alone. It only means it's time to stand on your own 2 feet. Whisper quietly to yourself, "I don't need anyone to save me. I just need to not abandon myself." That's the second step, and the turning point to rising even when no one is there. And if you're in that stage now, learning to stand alone with no one understanding or comforting you, see it as a sign that your soul is maturing. Let me know you're still here by leaving one word in the comments. Still, as a signal that even when no one stands beside you, you still choose to stand with yourself. Number 3. Stop complaining. The language of the victim ego. After you've learned to stand strong in solitude and soothe yourself, another subtle but demanding challenge arises. Stop complaining. Complaining is how the ego keeps you anchored in your comfort zone, the place where you get to see yourself as the victim. It convinces you that you have a reason not to change. But the irony is this: every time you complain, you reinforce the belief that you are powerless, unconsciously sending the message, "I have no strength." Carl Jung called this the shadow of self-pity. When you're trapped in that darkness, you stop acting and start repeating the same question, "Why me?" As if the universe is unfair, as if the world owes you an explanation. But the real question isn't why me, it's what can I do with this? The moment you change that question, the energy trapped in complaint begins to move again. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Every time you complain, your unconscious is running the show, turning you into a victim of circumstance. But when you look beneath the emotion that fuels your complaint, you step out of the shadow and become the one steering consciousness again. Complaining is a clever habit of the mind. It makes you feel like you're doing something, but in reality, you're staying still. Each complaint is a form of delayed action. When you're busy blaming circumstances, you lose the energy to transform them. Others may hurt you, but only you can decide whether that hurt becomes a chain or a lesson. Think of a stone at the bottom of a river. The current is strong. It grinds, it crashes, it carries the stone away. But over time, the very flow that seemed destructive polishes the stone until it becomes smooth and luminous. Life is the same. It doesn't pause because you complain. It keeps flowing, keeps testing, keeps shaping you. But if you endure the flow instead of cursing it, you'll become stronger, clearer, more beautiful than before. Complaining feeds the victim ego, the part of you that always wants someone else to take responsibility for your pain. That ego loves to feel pied, because as long as you're a victim, you're exempt from responsibility. But that's also the best way to stay stuck. On the other hand, every time you stop complaining and take action, no matter how small, you reclaim the energy lost to your unconscious. You rise not because someone pushes you, but because you choose not to stay in the dark any longer. Complaining often starts with small sentences. I'm so tired. No one understands me. I try so hard, but no one notices. Those phrases seem harmless, but they quietly feed an ego that believes happiness depends on others. Truly strong people don't need the world to comfort them. They can look directly at their pain, acknowledge it, and ask, "Now, what can I do?" A viewer once shared with me that after her friends betrayed her, she spent 6 months consumed by bitterness. I told anyone who would listen how awful they were, she said. But I realized I was telling the same story for half a year. That night, she wrote in her journal, "If no one was around to hear me complain, would I still tell this story?" The answer was no. The next day, she started writing about what she wanted to learn, to change, to create. It wasn't them leaving that hurt me, she said. It was that I held on to the story for too long. Stopping complaint doesn't mean denying pain. It means no longer living in it. You can still feel sadness, disappointment, grief. But instead of retelling the wound, you use that energy to build something new. Each action, no matter how small, is a declaration to the universe. I am no longer a victim of this. Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." And that choice to stop complaining and start acting is the doorway to a new level of strength. Every time you stop saying, "Why me?" and start asking, "What can I do with this?" you take another step forward, because ultimately that's how you rise even when no one is there. Not through pity, but through the quiet strength of taking responsibility for your own becoming. And then you'll realize you were never truly alone. You were just too busy complaining to hear your own soul calling. Number 4. Become your own source of validation. After you've stopped complaining and begun to act, a deeper test appears, the silence of being unseen. You stand up, you work hard, you give your best, yet no one praises you, no one acknowledges you, no one seems to notice. This is the point where most people give up. Not because they fear hardship, but because they fear invisibility. But it's precisely at this moment of no recognition that the universe tests whether you can keep going without the spotlight. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Because when you truly validate yourself, you no longer hide behind others' opinions. You don't need compliments. You don't need proof. You don't need witnesses to your worth, because you've become your own witness. I'm reminded of Cassandra in Greek mythology, the woman gifted by Apollo with the power of prophecy, but cursed so that no one would believe her. She saw the truth, saw disasters before they came, but everyone turned away, calling her mad. Yet even in isolation, Cassandra did not go silent. She kept speaking, stayed loyal to what she saw, even when no one listened. At a deeper level, her story is a metaphor for every strong soul. Those who continue to honor their truth in silence, even when the world refuses to see them. Sometimes being believed isn't as important as staying true to yourself. Likewise, in modern life, Many give their all only to be met with silence. I once spoke with a woman who, after years of dedication, was often the last one in her office at night. Yet when awards came, her boss praised someone else. "I felt invisible," she said. One day she decided to stop working to be seen and start working to see herself. Every time she finished a project, she wrote down what she'd done well, rewarded herself with a quiet afternoon, a coffee, a book. I realized external validation lasts for minutes, but self-recognition stays for days. That's the shift from the dependent ego to the self, the mature center of consciousness. In Jungian psychology, those who live from the self act, not for praise, but because it's an expression of who they are. They don't need an audience to know their worth, because their value doesn't come from applause. It comes from the frequency of inner truth. External validation in the end is just a reflection. Those who haven't seen their own light will always chase it in others' eyes. But those who've seen it within carry it wherever they go. They no longer need others to believe because their belief has become their foundation. Jung once said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people." When you dare to look inside to see both your weakness and your strength, you no longer need the world to prove anything to you. You're no longer controlled by the fear of not enough, because now you are enough simply because you know it. Self-validation isn't arrogance. It's the deepest form of self-respect. It's knowing you're still on your way, still imperfect, yet you hold yourself with both hands, light and shadow alike. Those who can validate themselves don't deny their flaws. They see them as proof of becoming. Mistakes don't reduce their worth. They make their path more real. Think of how steel is forged. Metal hardens only when exposed to fire. The same goes for the soul. Silence, neglect, and lack of recognition are the flames that strengthen your core. When no one else validates you, you're forced to look inward. And in that gaze, you discover something extraordinary. You're far stronger than you thought. And when you truly embrace that, something miraculous happens. You begin to glow from within. Others may not say a word, but they feel your presence steady, calm, grounded. Not because you try to shine, but because you no longer need to prove. Remember, every applause fades, every gaze eventually turns away. But your own gaze, if it's warm and honest, becomes a flame that never dies. And that is the secret of those who rise, even when no one stands beside them. If you feel the power of self-validation, of no longer seeking the world's eyes, but seeing yourself clearly, hit like on this video. That will be your signal to the universe. I'm ready to be my own source of light. Number 5. Rise quickly. Turn failure into fire. Have you ever wondered why, even after becoming stronger and calmer, life still makes you fall, especially when no one is there to lift you up? Failure in its truest sense isn't about loss or defeat. It's that moment when you stumble right on the path you believed in most. The times you thought you'd conquered your ego only for one small event or word to shake you again. You feel weak, ashamed, and in that loneliness, you're tempted to go back to be the pleasing version others once loved, just to be accepted again. But, as Jung taught, those falls don't come to destroy you. They come to reveal the parts of you that remain unhealed, the ones still waiting to be integrated and loved. Every time you fall, the shadow reappears. It's not punishment, it's illumination. It shines light on your hidden arrogance, your fear of criticism, your hunger for approval. And the moment you rise again without applause or support, your self expands. In a letter to Freud, Jung wrote, "Mistakes are, after all, the foundations of truth." Failure doesn't weaken you, it makes you real. Because only when no one catches you, do you learn how to walk with your own strength. I once knew a woman who ran a small business. After years of effort, she was betrayed by her co-founder and lost nearly everything. For months, she lived in guilt and fear. But one day, her therapist asked, If this isn't an ending, but a lesson, what is it teaching you? She went silent, then said, "Maybe I never truly listened to my intuition." From then on, she began journaling daily, not to complain, but to write what she was learning from the pain. A year later, she reopened her company. Smaller, but steadier. "I'm no longer afraid to fall," she said, "because every fall makes me more honest with myself." That's how failure becomes fire. You can't grow in safety because safety lulls the unconscious to sleep. But when you hit bottom, every layer of pretense burns away and your soul stands bare. From a neuroscience perspective, when you fail, the brain activates the anterior cingulate cortex, the area that processes the gap between expectation and reality. If you respond with fear or self-blame, your body releases cortisol, the stress hormone that freezes you. But when you take action, even a small step, your prefrontal cortex activates, releasing dopamine, the chemical of progress and hope. In other words, regret paralyzes you, but action heals you. Think of the phoenix, the mythical bird that regenerates by burning itself. Whenever it grows old, it dives into flames to shed its ashes, then rises again, brighter and freer. Humans are the same. If you dare to rise from your own ashes, you'll see that what burned away wasn't you. It was just the shell that had finished its purpose. Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." When we face failure without judgment, wounds cease to be enemies and become teachers. In pain, awareness is born. And only when we touch our wounds can we truly touch our humanity. In every failure, you have two choices. Let it define you, or let it refine you. When you say, "I'm a failure," you imprison yourself in the past. But when you say, "I'm learning something," you open a door to the future. Rock bottom is never the end. It's the ground you push off from. Strong souls aren't born from comfort. They're forged in collapse. Just as metal becomes a sword only after enduring heat, humans find their true strength when they face failure and refuse to retreat. Remember, falling doesn't make you weak, staying down does. When you shake off the ashes, face your mistake, and take one more step, even a small one, you're rewriting your story. One day, you'll see that every failure had a sacred purpose. It didn't come to break you. It came to reveal the truer, brighter, steadier version of you. So don't wait for someone to lift you up. Rise quickly, firmly, with a heart still warm. That moment, you don't just overcome failure. You become the flame that nothing can extinguish. Number 6. Act without relying on inspiration. Will over emotion. After learning to rise from your falls, a deeper lesson awaits. To act, even when you don't feel ready. Because if solitude forged your strength, discipline will make you shine. Jung wrote that will is the energy capable of reorganizing the entire psyche. It's not just the force to do, but the power to transcend fleeting emotion in service of lasting meaning. When you act only from inspiration, your ego still rules the part of you that always seeks comfort. But when you act beyond feeling, you no longer need motivation because you've submitted to a higher order. The order of the self, where action flows from purpose, not mood. Inspiration is a gift, but discipline is the foundation. There will be days when you feel no motivation, no hope, no sense of meaning. But if on those days you still sit down, still continue even one small step, you're training your greatest power. Will over emotion. Jung said that most people lose their life force waiting for inspiration instead of cultivating will. If you only act when you feel excited, your life will be full of beginnings but empty of mastery. Because inspiration is wind, it comes and goes, but will is direction. It keeps the ship moving even when the wind dies. I'm reminded of psychologist Angela Duckworth, who developed the concept of grit, the endurance of passion and perseverance. As a child, she wasn't the smartest student, but instead of believing she wasn't enough, she chose to believe she could persist longer. Years of study led her to discover that extraordinary achievers aren't the most talented, but those who act when enthusiasm fades, especially when no one is cheering. Jung once said, "Freedom of will is the ability to do gladly that which I must do." Freedom isn't doing what you like, it's gladly doing what's necessary. When you rise above your emotions, you stop being their victim and become their guide. A friend of mine, a single mother working 2 jobs, once told me she woke up at 5 a.m. every day cooking, working, surviving. There came a time when she was utterly drained. "I've lost all passion," she said. But one day when her son asked, "Mom, what happened to your dream?" something in her shifted. That night, she decided to start again, not for inspiration, but for responsibility to herself. She began small, waking 15 minutes earlier to read, writing 3 daily goals, saving every spare dollar for her dream bakery. Some days, she was exhausted, but she kept going. "I stopped waiting for motivation," she said. "I just needed will because my son needs to see his mother not give up." A year later, she opened a small bakery. No one helped, no one encouraged, but she kept walking. She learned that willpower isn't a feeling. It's a decision to continue even when your heart feels heavy. This story reminds us inspiration doesn't create will. Will creates inspiration. When you begin, you don't need to feel ready. You just need to be honest with your first step. Inspiration will follow as a reward for perseverance. Strong-willed people aren't emotionless. They simply don't let emotion control them. They still fear, doubt, and tire, but they act for something greater, for values, commitments, integrity. Each time they do what's right instead of what's easy, they strengthen the bridge between consciousness and soul, between the small ego and the mature self. One day you'll realize that your most defining progress didn't happen in moments of excitement, but in moments of resistance, especially when you were alone with no reminders or encouragement. Those are the moments that shape you, not because they're easy, but because you refuse to let mood or loneliness dictate your direction. So if today you feel uninspired, unseen, unsupported, remember, you don't need any of that to move. You just need one small decision to start. Not perfectly, not dramatically. Simply start, and then consistency will take you further than anyone who ever tried to help you to the far shore of yourself. If you've ever had to keep going alone, without motivation, without support, guided only by will, share your story in the comments, because maybe your story will be the small flame that keeps someone else from giving up today. Number 7. You don't need anyone to understand you. Everything you seek is within. There comes a moment after all the silent effort when you realize you've done everything right, kept walking, stayed disciplined, stayed faithful to the path. Yet the outer world remains silent. No one knows, no one understands, no one says thank you. And in that quiet, a subtle emptiness arises. Do all these efforts even matter? That's the final lesson. When no one is left to lean on, you must find your own light. When you crave understanding, you're still asking others to validate your existence. But no one can truly understand you because only you know how deep your inner journey has been. Carl Jung once wrote, "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." All the answers you seek are already within your unconscious. You only need enough stillness to hear them. After years of living to be understood, you realize not everyone has the capacity to see you at your depth. Sometimes they only see the parts that make them comfortable. And that's not their fault. In a world where everyone is searching for themselves, few can truly see another soul. When you stop expecting understanding from the outside, you begin the return inward where all your contradictions start to harmonize. Fear and courage, pain and healing, darkness and light. There, you no longer need anyone to confirm that you are enough. You just need to know that you are being true to your soul, and that is enough. When that happens, you stop looking for saviors because you've become your own. I once heard the story of a young painter who after years of painting for trends and sales, fell into creative exhaustion. One day, she left the city, rented a small house by the lake, and cut off all communication for a month. She painted again, not to show, not to sell, but to listen to what her soul wanted to say. When she returned, her art had changed, raw, alive, full of soul. A gallery in Berlin saw her new work by chance and invited her to exhibit. She said, "When I stopped trying to be seen, people began to truly see me." That's the paradox Jung described. When you stop seeking outwardly, you become a center of inward gravity. Because creative energy, love, and wisdom don't come from being understood. They come from accepting yourself, even the parts no one else understands. Like a lighthouse in the night sea, it doesn't shout to be seen nor move to seek attention. It simply stands shining, and by doing so guides those who are lost. Humans are the same when you stand in your own light without needing recognition. Your presence itself becomes guidance for others. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." When you stop asking the world, "Who am I?" and start asking yourself, "What do I truly need?" the veil of the unconscious begins to lift. The psychotherapist Carl Rogers once said, "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. No one will ever fully understand you. But that doesn't mean you can't be loved. Because real love doesn't require full understanding, only full acceptance. And when you learn to accept yourself in all your complexity, depth, and contradictions, you radiate an energy that makes others feel safe near you." Strangely, the moment you stop seeking someone to understand you, you begin to be understood, not through words, but through presence. The ones who truly belong in your life will feel it without explanation. If life has ever exhausted you with the need to be understood, rest. Sit in silence. Place your hand over your heart and listen. That voice inside, faint but steady, knows the way. It knows where to go, what to release, and how to begin again. And then you'll realize, no one needs to complete you, because you were never incomplete. Everything you've ever searched for, love, peace, understanding, are simply different faces of one thing. Coming home to yourself, that's how you rise even when no one is by your side. Not through the noise of proving, but through the quiet of awakening. A person who can rise when no one is there isn't someone who feels no pain, but someone who turns loneliness into a teacher, silence into fuel, and every fall into a foundation of strength. They don't live to be seen, but to be honest with their soul. When the world goes silent, they listen within. When no one believes, they hold faith themselves. And from that place that once felt empty, another kind of power is born. A power that needs no proof. Because in the end, this journey isn't about becoming unbreakable. It's about becoming authentic with your fears, your will, and your own light. When you stop waiting to be saved, you'll realize you were never weak. You just hadn't yet seen how strong you really are. If this video has awakened something in your heart, share it, because maybe someone out there needs this reminder too, that they are strong enough to stand up and keep believing in themselves. And don't forget to subscribe, because this journey has just begun. The journey of becoming yourself, steady, clear, and free even when no one stands beside you. And now, as you continue to rest, to drift, there is another layer of this journey waiting to unfold. Because the strength you've built in solitude, the power you've discovered within yourself, naturally leads to something even deeper. A paradox. Jung understood well that sometimes the ultimate act of strength is not holding on, but letting go. You've learned to stand alone, to rise without anyone beside you. And now, in this gentle darkness, you're ready to discover what happens when you stop forcing, when you release your grip, when you trust the natural rhythm of your soul. Let these words wash over you. Into trust. Into the wisdom of surrender. Have you ever experienced a strange moment like this? Everything you once tried to hold on to suddenly becomes too heavy to continue carrying. And deep inside, a very small voice whispers, "It's time to let go." Not letting go because you lost. Not letting go because you have no strength left. But letting go because you sense even just faintly that something ahead is waiting for you to step into. But you cannot bring the past along with you. We grow up believing that we must control, must try hard, must cling tightly in order to keep life in our hands. But Jung saw a different truth. Sometimes it is precisely when you relax that life finally has space to organize itself, and everything begins to slide into its right place, quietly, precisely, without you having to tense up even a little more. This video does not teach you how to control better. It comes to show you what really happens when you finally allow yourself to let go. When you stop forcing life to follow your will and begin trusting the deeper rhythm inside your soul. Because in the very moment you let go in the way Jung always described, everything begins to fall into place on its own, right now. Perhaps it is not that you randomly found this video, but that the video found you at the exact moment you're preparing to step into a new chapter of release and reorganization in your life. Number 1. Letting go of the illusion of control. Life begins to self-organize. There are moments in life when you feel like you are trying to keep everything within your grasp as if you're squeezing a handful of sand. The tighter you hold, the faster it slips through your fingers. You create detailed plans. You predict all possibilities. You try to control emotions, people, timing, and even the future. But the more you try, the heavier, more chaotic, and more tangled life becomes. Many people think that this is lack of discipline, lack of luck, or not trying hard enough. But from Carl Jung's perspective, it is a sign that you are trapped in one of the deepest illusions of the ego. The ego's illusion of mastery. The illusion that we can control life through our will and our plans. Jung believed that most human suffering does not come from what happens, but from trying to force life to operate exactly according to the script in our mind. When the ego believes it must control everything, it begins living in chronic tension. What if it's not right? What if things deviate from the plan? What if the result is not what I want? And in that tension, you are no longer living. You are merely trying to manage life as if it were a machine. But life is not a machine. It is water. And water never agrees to be forced into the curves you draw on a map. I once met a young woman who said that she was very ambitious and strict with herself. She planned every milestone. At 25, she would have a stable job. At 28, she would get married. At 30, she would buy a house. At 32, she would build her own career. She chased each goal as if following the timetable of a train. But then, just one small incident, her company went bankrupt and everything collapsed. She panicked, feeling like a failure for not following the timeline. In many therapy sessions afterward, she finally realized she was not hurting because she lost her job. She was hurting because she had to face the truth that life was not following the map she had drawn. "I thought I was driving my life," she said. "But I was only trying to steer a wave." And in that moment, the process of letting go began. Carl Jung called this the moment the ego steps back, giving way to self-regulation, life's intrinsic mechanism of recalibration. You no longer force everything to operate according to your will. Instead, you allow life to self-organize according to deeper principles of the unconscious. The strange thing is, only when you let go do things begin to fall into their right place quietly, naturally, gracefully. Just as Jung once wrote, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. In what appears most chaotic, there is always a hidden order, but you only see it when you stop trying to control. And then, at some point, when you release the things you once held tightly, you begin to realize a simple truth that changes the way you see everything. Life never needed you to control it in order to function. It only needed you to stop resisting it. When resistance dissolves, the natural rhythm of life reveals itself. Lighter, quieter, yet more precise than any plan you have ever made. But the most interesting thing is when you release control, you do not become passive, as many people assume. You don't leave life alone. You don't give up. You don't lose your direction. Letting go doesn't make you lost. It only stops you from looking at the world through fear. And in that very moment, things that were once blurry suddenly become clear. Not because you tried to understand, but because you became quiet enough to see. You realize that life does not need you to calculate every step. It only needs you to be awake enough to recognize the right step when it appears. When you loosen your grip, you start noticing subtle shifts. Something no longer attracts you the way it once did. A new direction feels light and effortless, or a strange sense that this is right arises even before the mind can name it. That is not magic. That is the deeper order returning, what Jung called the psyche's self-regulation. And then you realize what you must let go of is not life itself, but the way you were approaching it. When you release your tight grasp, life does not fall into chaos. It falls into place. Everything falls into place, not because you control better, but because you stop trying to control. If you have ever experienced a moment of letting go of a plan, a person, an expectation, and suddenly life shifted into clearer alignment than ever before, share that story in the comments. Your very real story might be the key that helps someone else find the courage to release and begin stepping into their new life. Number 2. Letting go of the old identity. Your true path appears. When you release control, something very natural happens. You begin to hear the voice of your true self more clearly. And from that quietness, you reach the next stage of the journey, realizing that it is not life holding you back, but the older version of you that does not want you to go further. As we grow up, we unconsciously create a fixed version of ourselves. I am this kind of person. I must live this kind of life. I am suited for this type of goal. I only deserve those kinds of things. Jung called this ego identification, the self's attachment to old stories not because they are true but because they are familiar. And the painful reality is sometimes the thing that makes us stuck is not the situation but the invisible cage built from our own yesterdays. A friend of mine, Elise, always believed she was not good enough to step out of her comfort zone. She chose the same old job because she feared change. She chose the same relationship because she thought she couldn't have someone better. She chose the same life because she believed it was the only one she was capable of. But in truth, she wasn't living the life she wanted. She was living the life her 20-year-old self once thought was safe. One day, facing prolonged stagnation, she said something I will never forget. I'm not afraid of starting a new chapter. I'm afraid of betraying who I used to be. That sentence hurt, but it was honest. We are often more loyal to our old self than to the self that is growing inside us. There is a very beautiful metaphor I want you to hold in your heart. Imagine wearing a shirt that once fit perfectly, once made you proud, once felt like your identity. But with time, your body and soul grow. The shirt no longer fits. It is tight on the chest, constricting on the shoulders, uncomfortable to breathe in. Yet you keep wearing it just because it was once right. Life is the same. Your old self, old personality, old ambitions, old limitations once fit you. But when you change, if you keep holding on to them, you do not grow. You shrink yourself to fit your past. And when we talk about the past holding on to the present, Greek mythology offers a subtle story about the goddess Eos. Eos loved a mortal man named Tithanos. She asked Zeus to grant him immortality, but forgot to ask for eternal youth. So, Tithanos never died. But he also never changed or grew. He was trapped in a form that became increasingly hollow, shrinking with each passing day until he no longer recognized himself. Jung would call that the tragedy of a soul refusing to evolve. Strangely, many of us live like Tithonus without realizing it, clinging to an old version of ourselves until it withers us from within. But the beautiful truth is, when you release that old version, the first thing that appears is not collapse, but clarity. You begin to see what was previously hidden behind the fear of change. An option that once seemed vague suddenly becomes bright. A direction you never dared to consider now feels possible. A feeling that this is who I truly am rises strongly. That is the very moment everything falls into place. Just as Jung described, fall into place is not magic. It is the natural process of the psyche. When you stop forcing life to resemble the past, expired goals naturally fall away as gently as an old leaf detaching from a branch. You no longer resonate with ambitions you once chased, only to satisfy the ego. Relationships sustained by habit begin to loosen. Things you once tried to hold with both hands suddenly lose meaning. They are no longer right simply because they are no longer right for the person you are becoming. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." The greatest privilege of life is not creating a new self through willpower, but allowing the true self, which has always existed, to step into the light. You do not create your true path. You simply allow it to appear. And that path never disappeared. It was only covered by the dust of old stories. When you blow that dust away, everything begins to fall into place, quietly, gently, faithfully. Number 3, letting go of what drains you. Your energy realigns. But have you ever wondered if life only truly falls into place when we let go? Then what happens when we keep holding on to things that drain us? This is the question most people avoid. Because to admit that something is draining your energy, a job, a relationship, an environment, even just a habit, means you must dare to face the truth that it no longer belongs to you. Jung believed that psychic energy never disappears, it only redirects. When you cling to what has expired, your energy no longer flows toward the path meant for you. It leaks, gets pulled backward, and is consumed by things that do not lift you. That is why many people say, "I try so hard, but I don't feel like I'm moving forward." They do not realize that the problem is not lack of effort, but effort in the wrong direction. As Jung once wrote, "What you resist not only persists, but grows in size." The more you resist the truth that something has finished its role in your life, the more energy it consumes. In a group sharing session, I heard the story of a young woman named Laya. For 3 years, she loved a man and did everything she could to keep the relationship. She yielded, compromised, stayed silent, changed herself. She spoke softly to avoid upsetting him, shrank herself to avoid conflict, endured hurt because she feared he would leave if she expressed her needs. From the outside, everything seemed fine, but inside, Laya was fading. She described it as my energy being taken away by someone who never returned it. When she finally accepted that this love was no longer aligned with her frequency, something strange happened. The heaviness on her chest disappeared. Not because she forgot him, but because she stopped holding on to what no longer belonged to her. When she let go, the energy trapped for so long began to return. That is the nature of energy. It always seeks the place that matches it. When you release what no longer fits, the flow recalibrates. Jung called this energetic self-regulation, the psyche's mechanism of rebalancing. You do not need to force your energy to change. You just need to stop holding what disrupts it. Imagine carrying a backpack filled with stones. Each stone represents something that was once important, once helped you grow. But as time passes, you still carry them, not because they're useful, but because you think you should keep them. And then one day you ask, "Why am I so exhausted?" Not because the path is steep, but because you're carrying what no longer belongs. Letting go is not losing. Letting go is returning things to where they belong. And when you do that, life begins to organize itself as if it had been waiting for you to lighten your load for a very long time. Neuroscience shows that the body recovers quickly when it is no longer pulled into continuous stress states. When a relationship makes you anxious, when an environment makes you shrink, the sympathetic nervous system goes into overdrive. Muscle tension, reduced focus, loss of motivation, loss of connection with yourself. But when the draining factor is removed, the parasympathetic system immediately rebalances. In other words, the moment you release what knots you, the body and mind begin to fall into place on their own. Letting go is not losing. Letting go is acknowledging that your energy deserves to flow toward what nourishes you. And the strange but always true thing is, when you release what is out of alignment, your energy reorients faster than you expect. The right things, the right job, the right people, the right opportunities begin moving toward you. Not because you force them, but because you create space for them. When you release the hand that is gripping tightly, life finally has room to place the gift into your palm. Many people do not receive what they deserve, not because they are unworthy, but because they have no space left in their mind and energy. A wrong relationship can block the doorway to a right one. A draining habit can keep you from meeting the better version of yourself. And that is why, in the journey, when you finally let go, everything falls into place. This part is the key. If you continue holding what exhausts you, life cannot give you what gives you life. Letting go of what drains you is not selfish. It is the most honest act you can offer your soul. When your energy is returned to its right direction, the right pieces begin to move. When you become lighter, everything around you begins to realign. And perhaps right now you already feel something very small shifting inside you. A thought that you deserve a flow that matches you better. Trust that it is not a coincidence. It is your energy preparing to reorganize. And what about you? If you are ready to step into the phase of life where everything begins to fall into place, let me know by commenting just one word: let go. No need to tell your story. No need to explain. Just one word: let go. Yet sometimes that is the first declaration to yourself that you have chosen to become lighter, chosen the right direction, and chosen the life waiting for you ahead. Number 4. Letting go of social expectations. You realign with your inner authority. There is something few people realize. What exhausts us even more than wrong relationships, misaligned jobs, or expired habits are social expectations, not expectations, someone says directly. But the expectations that silently slip into our mind over the years: you must be stable. You must be successful. You must be loved in the right way. You must marry at the right age. You must be agreeable. You must behave properly. You must become a version approved by society. If not, you are off. Carl Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear to exist in the world. But what few people understand is the persona is not the problem. The problem begins when you start believing the mask is who you are. And when you believe it long enough, you no longer live your life. You live the life society wants you to live. It is like wearing a dress tailored for someone else. The more you try to adjust it to fit, the more you lose the sense of your true body. A viewer named Mira wrote to the channel sharing her story. She loved a gentle, quiet, kind man. But her family did not approve because he was not successful enough, did not have social status, was not the kind of man everyone praises. She wasn't conflicted because the love was lacking, but because she feared going against the image of the wise woman others expected her to be. She chose to break up, chose what everyone said was right, chose what society applauded. But months later, she told me the emptiness inside her was heavier than the sadness of the breakup, not because she lost him, but because she lost herself, because she realized she did not choose with her heart. She chose with social expectations. Jung once said, The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. The scariest thing is not that the world rejects you, but that you dare to accept yourself. Because when you truly return to your authentic self, you must let go of social expectations, the ones you carried so lightly you didn't notice, but over time grew as heavy as a stone on your back. You do not need extreme decisions to understand this. Just observe your feelings. Every time you do something socially correct, but your heart tightens, that is a signal. Every time you choose something others praise, but you feel no relief, that is a signal. Every time you force yourself down a respected path, but feel disconnected inside, that is a signal. And these signals do not come to shame you. They come to pull you back to your inner authority, your inner power. Jung believed the self only emerges when the persona loosens, meaning that when you stop trying to play the role of the perfect citizen, the perfect child, the perfect partner, the perfect woman, your true self finally has space to step forward. Many people say they fear letting go of social expectations because what if I'm wrong? What if people judge me? But remember John Mayer's famous line in Gravity: "Gravity is working against me." What holds us back isn't always wrongness. It is the gravity of expectation. It pulls you down, keeps you in places that no longer fit, prevents you from flying in the direction you need. But social gravity is not destiny. It only feels strong when you cling to it. Once you let go, something very strange happens. The right things begin to move toward you, not because you tried, but because you stopped trying to be someone else. You choose the right person not because they fit a standard, but because they match your frequency. You choose the right job not because it is admired, but because it makes you feel alive. You choose the right environment not because it makes you look good, but because it makes you real. And suddenly, life falls into place like puzzle pieces that once looked mismatched. But when you stop forcing them to fit society's template, they turn themselves in the right direction quietly, gently, faithfully. And if right now you feel a soft, subtle shift inside, as if something within you has moved that is not accidental, that is your inner authority saying it's time to live as yourself. Trust that voice, because when you let go of social expectations, you do not lose your life. You simply return it to the only person who has the right to shape it: you. Number 5. Letting go of forcing outcomes. The right timing emerges. And when you have stepped out of the patterns that society unconsciously imposed on you, when the inner voice begins to grow stronger than the expectations of others, you reach a deeper layer of letting go. Not only letting go of the roles you play, but letting go of the need to make something happen according to your own timeline. Because when you return to your inner authority, you no longer chase the noise outside. You begin to listen to your own natural rhythm of time. And here you will see an important truth about maturity. The right things do not come because you push. They come when you are ready to receive them. There is a truth that when we truly desire something, a progression, a change, an opportunity, we easily fall into the state of wanting it to happen right now. Not because we are controlling, but because we fear that if it does not happen when we want, it will slip out of our hands. But life has its own rhythm. Jung once wrote, "There is no linear evolution. There is only a circumambulation of the self." Human psychology does not develop in a straight line, nor can it be sped up by impatience. Every process matures according to its own inner cycles, according to the rhythm of the unconscious, not the schedule of the ego. Forcing a result to arrive sooner than its time is like rushing to open a fruit before it ripens. You do not make it ripen faster, you only spoil its sweetness. This is the mechanism Jung called alignment, the natural matching between inner and outer. Not luck, not magic, but the result of giving every process the time it needs. Another example comes from Oprah Winfrey's own journey. She once longed for a role so intensely that she felt she could not live without it. She prayed, she worked, she waited, but the role went to someone else. Oprah was devastated, feeling rejected. Yet only a few months later, she was invited to join The Color Purple, the film that made her a legend. Later, she said, "Sometimes not getting what you want is the greatest blessing." Jung would surely smile at that statement, because it reflects the truth that the soul always knows its own timing. The conscious mind does not. When we rush, we are easily pulled into the tension of expectation. We lose breath, presence, clarity. But when we step back from the need to make something happen right now, a new space opens, the space of growth. In that space, you still put in effort. You still move toward what you want, but you do not force it to occur before you or life are ready. Someone once asked me, "How do I know when it's time to stop forcing outcomes?" Jung has a very subtle answer. Observe the feeling within yourself. What belongs to you creates an expansive feeling even if it challenges you. What is not yet the right time creates a constricted feeling no matter how hard you try. When you let go of that urgency, you are giving your future a chance to arrive in its own rhythm and in your own rhythm. I once worked with a young woman who pressured herself to find a good job immediately after leaving her previous one. She submitted applications nonstop, set extremely high expectations, and each rejection made her feel like she was falling behind. When the stress peaked, she decided to take 2 weeks off just to stabilize her life. Not to give up, but to stop forcing. Strangely, during that break, a company that had previously rejected her reached out again because a new position had opened, and she said something I will never forget. Turns out what I wanted didn't disappear. It was just waiting for me to stop panicking. When you let go of urgency, you give your future a chance to arrive in its own rhythm, and in your own rhythm, because life always moves according to a very quiet principle. What is meant for you will come when you are mature enough to hold it, not when you are impatient to have it. And if right now you feel that you have been running too fast, pushing too hard, demanding too early, try placing your hand on your heart and whisper, "I allow the right timing to appear." When you say this, the space inside you shifts, and in that space, something very aligned, very light, very natural will begin moving toward you. And if you feel that this part of the content touched the exact rhythm of your life, if it made you just a little lighter, a little clearer, take a moment to like the video as a small but powerful affirmation that you are ready for the right things to find you at the right time, in the right way, through the right people. It is also a way of whispering to yourself, "I am learning to trust the timing of my life." Number 6, letting go of resistance. You enter the flow state of synchronicity, and when you have let go of the need to force things into happening on your timeline, when you stop chasing what no longer matches your frequency, you enter a deeper layer of letting go, where you not only release timing, but release the internal resistance itself. Here, you will see the miracle that unfolds when you stop resisting. Life begins to cooperate with you in quiet but astonishingly precise ways. Resistance is not an action but an inner state. The tightening, the defensiveness, the contraction, the fear that if you do not push, everything will stop. Jung made it very clear that the ego always tries to resist the natural movement of the soul. And it is within this resistance that people stay stuck in old chapters. But when you release resistance, what happens is not that you fall, but that you slip into the flow, the language Jung used to describe the movement of the unconscious. And within that flow, synchronicity begins to appear. Imagine you are a small boat trying to row against the current. The more you resist, the stronger the water pushes back. Your arms tire, your heart grows heavy. But the moment you turn your awe and release resistance, the water which has always wanted to carry you in the right direction immediately lifts you. You do nothing yet move faster than ever. Synchronicity is when the river of life begins carrying you instead of leaving you to struggle alone. According to Jung, synchronicity, meaningful coincidences, does not appear to amuse you, but to show you that you are headed the right way. Jung described synchronicity as the bridge between the inner world and the outer world. When you stop resisting your emotions, the external signs begin mirroring exactly what is unfolding inside you. The more honest you are with your inner truth, the more the world responds with events so meaningful they take your breath away. It feels as if an invisible rhythm is aligning with you, as if life is saying, "Finally, you are listening." I once heard the story of a woman named Hannah. She stood at a crossroads in her career, torn between staying in a stable job or stepping into a new field she had always dreamed of. She kept forcing herself to decide, forcing analysis, forcing plans, and each time she forced, her mind only grew more tangled. One morning, exhausted from thinking too much, she decided to drop everything and walk along the beach just to breathe. She said, "I don't want to think anymore. I don't want to control anymore. I just want to walk." And while she walked, a wave washed a small piece of driftwood onto the shore with the word "begin" written on it. Not a decorative item, not something someone placed intentionally, just a piece of wood floating to the right place at the right time to the right person. Hannah said that in that moment she no longer needed a plan. She knew not with logic but with the alignment between her soul and the sign in front of her. 3 weeks later, she applied for the new job and was accepted in the very first round with minimal interviewing. Synchronicity is not magic. It is the psyche's self-adjusting mechanism. When you are quiet enough to hear, soft enough to feel, and open enough to see, it does not appear when you push, but when you open. It does not come when you are rushing, but when you are present. And the more fully present you are, the more you realize that these coincidences are in fact subtle dialogues between your unconscious and life itself. What you need to know always finds its way to you. You were simply too noisy before to hear it. Jung once said, "We meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life, and synchronicity is one of those disguises. When you release resistance, you meet the truth of yourself through the signs life sends you." Sometimes it is a sentence someone casually says. Sometimes it is a book falling open to the exact page you need. Sometimes it is a stranger smiling as if they understand you. These small things are not random. They are reminders that you are returning to your own flow. And if you notice, synchronicity never comes when you are strong. It comes when you are real. Not when you are controlling, but when you are soft. Not when you are forcing, but when you return to yourself. It is that softness that opens the door for life to come closer to you. And in the next part, we will go even deeper into what happens when you no longer try to control life. Life begins to reorganize itself for you. All you need to do is continue softening and stepping into that flow. Number 7. Letting go as a ritual of transformation. Life rearranges around your new self. There are moments in life when you let go of something not because you lost, but because you suddenly understand that you have moved into a different layer of your being. Letting go here is no longer exhaustion, not resignation, not running out of strength. Letting go becomes an inner ritual, like the moment you set down an old key because the door it once opened is no longer where you belong. Carl Jung believed that every genuine surrender is a sign of inner restructuring. When an old layer falls away, a new frequency begins to emerge, and from that moment on, life no longer operates according to your old identity. It begins rearranging itself to match the person you are becoming. Letting go as a ritual of transformation is like the moment a snake sheds its skin. It does not try to become more beautiful, stronger, or better. It simply knows the old skin no longer fits its inner growth. The shedding is not the goal. It is the natural consequence. And you are the same. When you release a layer too tight for your soul, life in a very quiet but orderly way begins shifting around you. Jung once wrote, "We are not what happened to us. We are what we choose to become." When you let go, you are choosing to become, not to become someone better in the eyes of the world, but to become a deeper version of who you truly are. And in that movement, everything that once felt chaotic begins to fall into place. There was a woman at age 33 who decided to leave a long-term relationship, not because the man was bad, but because deep down she knew she had shrunk herself for too long to fit into the mold he wanted. The day she let go, she did not expect anything good to happen immediately. She simply felt a vast emptiness open in her chest. But then, strange things began to happen. Just a few months later, she received a promotion. Not because she overworked, but because she began showing up as a more confident and authentic version of herself. She met new friends, people who spoke the same soul language she had never encountered before. And then, when she wasn't even trying to love again, a person aligned with her new frequency entered her life as a natural continuation. She said, "It wasn't that I found a new life. It was that the new life found me after I stopped forcing myself into a place I no longer belonged." That is the ritual of transformation, the soul's silent ceremony. Letting go at this level is no longer an action. It is a frequency upgrade. You do not try to attract anything. You become the thing that attracts. You do not try to find the right person, the right opportunity, the right door. You become the frequency that the right things naturally gravitate toward. Modern science also shows that when people release old psychological patterns, the brain undergoes a process of neural reconnection. Areas associated with fear decrease activity, while areas associated with creativity, intuition, and decision-making strengthen. This explains why after major letting go decisions, you suddenly become clearer, more creative, and feel that life fits you more than before. You are not only changing psychologically, you are changing your brain structure. Letting go becomes the science of transformation. And not only science, every ancient spiritual tradition says the same thing. Zen master Lingi once told a story about a young disciple who asked, "Master, what must I do to awaken?" Lingi replied, "Let go." The disciple asked, "Let go of what?" The master said, "Let go of what is not you." The disciple then asked, "If I let go of everything, what is left?" The master smiled. "What is left is you. And when that happens, life will know exactly what to do with you." That story is not about effort, but about alignment. When the true self appears, life recognizes you as if it has been waiting for you for a long time. And when you stand at this level of transformation, you begin to see things that were once unexplainable become clear. Old relationships fall away to make room for aligned ones. New opportunities appear at the right time. Jungian synchronicities happen more frequently and more precisely. Life begins presenting a pattern you could not see before. Because when you let go as a ritual, you are sending a signal to the universe. I am ready to live as my new self. And from that moment on, everything begins to fall into place. Not because of miracles, but because you have stepped into the level where what belongs to you has been waiting. When you look back at your entire journey of letting go, you will realize something very quiet but very true. Nothing leaves without creating space inside you. Every time you release an old script, an old version, an old expectation, life opens a spaciousness large enough for what is right to enter. Not loudly, not with warning, just gently, like a door that has long been waiting for your touch. Letting go, in Jung's words, is not losing control. It is returning life to its rightful flow. And strangely enough, it is precisely when you stop gripping that the most enduring things find you. The relationships where you can be yourself. The opportunities that match the frequency you are growing into, the paths you never dared to imagine before. If you feel this video touches some part of your heart, perhaps it is not just for you to listen. Perhaps it has arrived at the moment you are ready to release yet another layer and to let life begin rearranging itself around your new self. Share this video if you feel someone else needs this gentle reminder. And don't forget to subscribe, because the journey toward a life that fits you has only just begun. And as you continue to rest, drifting deeper, there is one more layer waiting to unfold. Because as you've learned to rise alone and discovered the wisdom of letting go, You may have noticed something else stirring within you. Those moments when emotions flare without warning, when reactions rise faster than thought, when something small touches something ancient inside you. Jung understood that the journey inward is also a journey through these emotional currents, these unconscious waves that move through us, especially in the quiet darkness, where defenses fall away and truth surfaces. Let yourself sink even deeper now, into that space where you no longer need to control, where you can simply observe, simply witness the movements of your own soul. This final part of tonight's journey will guide you through understanding these inner stirrings, not with tension, but with the gentle awareness of someone who has learned to watch the waves without being swept away. Breathe slowly, let go completely, and allow these words to wash through you, like water smoothing ancient stones, carrying away what no longer serves, leaving only clarity, stillness, peace. Have you ever wondered why there are moments when you react so quickly that even you do not understand what has just risen inside you? Just a single careless comment is enough to make your heart tighten. A small attitude can make you angry, and a brief silence can leave you feeling uneasy for an entire day. Those reactions seem to come from the situation right in front of you. But according to Jung, most of them are echoes of the unconscious, where unnamed memories, old wounds, and forgotten parts of you are still quietly at work. When someone hurts you, you often think the fault lies with them. But Jung pointed out that the more easily a person is emotionally triggered, the less they have mastered their own inner world. Therefore, true strength does not lie in reacting faster or more fiercely, but in the ability to not react immediately. The moment you stop, observe what is moving inside, and realize that this emotion is not just the story of the present. So what would change in your life if instead of reacting, you learn to look at yourself first? Stay until the end of this piece, because a Jungian perspective on emotions can open for you a completely different way of living, where you are no longer swept away by unconscious reactions but begin to reclaim your own freedom. Part 1. When an emotion flares up, it is an inner part calling you to look back at yourself. The eruption of emotion is something no one can avoid, but what makes it so hard to grasp is the way it appears. Sudden, illogical, and completely indifferent to whether you are ready or not. It comes in moments that seem to hold nothing special. You do not understand why you react so intensely. And even when you try to reassure yourself that it is nothing, the emotion continues to rush through your body like a current that cannot find a way out. Jung believed that every emotional outburst is the expression of something that was already there, not of something that has just happened. He looked at human reactions, not to judge whether a person is too sensitive or too weak, but to search for traces of unconscious contents rising up from deeper layers. As Jung once wrote, emotion is the chief source of all becoming conscious. There can be no transforming of darkness into light and of apathy into movement without emotion. The stronger an emotion is, the more it deviates from the actual scale of the situation. The more there is beneath it a deeper story, a forgotten memory, a wound that has been avoided, a part of you that has been pushed into darkness for too long. If you imagine the soul as a wide room, intense emotions are the knocks on doors in corners you rarely illuminate. You can ignore them once, twice, but the knocking will return louder, clearer, because the unconscious is always trying to get you to look at what you are not yet ready to face. And precisely in the moment when you feel that discomfort most clearly, a truth becomes bright. Emotion is not something to be extinguished, but an invitation to turn inward. Modern psychology explains this phenomenon through an interesting mechanism. The brain stores emotionally charged memories longer than ordinary memories. A study from the University of California showed that when a present situation recalls an emotional memory, The brain reacts many times more strongly than would be appropriate for the current situation. This means you are not reacting to the now. You are reacting to a fragment of the past being activated in the now. This is exactly what Jung described nearly a century ago. The unconscious always moves one step ahead of consciousness. To see this more clearly, look at the story of Daniel, a colleague I once worked with. Daniel is extremely responsible, always finishing work on time, always ready to help others. But just one very mild comment that he seemed to be behind schedule would make him tense up, his face flush, his voice turn defensive. Those who do not understand him often think he is too sensitive, but the truth is completely different. One evening in a conversation after work, Daniel shared that he grew up in a family with very high expectations, just being a little slow, and he would be scolded, making a small mistake, and he would be compared to others. His body and nervous system had learned to react to any signal related to not good enough. So, a very soft remark about his progress, even when the other person had no bad intention, touched a deep emotional memory within him. He was not reacting to that remark. He was reacting to a childhood full of pressure that had never been acknowledged. Daniel's story is not rare. It is evidence of an important truth. Emotions are not irrational. They are old. They do not come from the present moment. They come from the history of your soul. And every time they flare up, they are trying to tell you there is something here that needs to be looked at. If you observe more deeply, you will see that explosive emotions often share one common feature. They come too fast. They spark like a flame touching dry paper, leaving no time to think, no time to choose. That is because emotion does not pass through reason. It moves straight from the unconscious into the body. Once the body reacts, the mind then runs after to explain. Sadly, most of us do not stop to ask why. We only focus on the person who is making us uncomfortable. We forget that the person in front of us is only a mirror, while the real image lies within us. Jung often said that when you feel angry, sad, or offended and do not know why, you are standing at the edge of a major discovery. The emotional outburst is not an obstacle. It is a clue. It is like a warmth spreading from a half-open door. Behind it lies a part of your inner world you have never stepped into. And if you are brave enough to move closer, you will realize that you are not only seeing the pain, you are also seeing the strength that the pain has long concealed. From another angle, emotional explosions also show you what truly matters to you. You are not angry because someone broke a promise. You are angry because you long to be honored. You are not sad because someone forgot you. You are sad because you want to be seen, remembered, to hold a place in someone's heart. You are not upset because of one critical comment. You are upset because you have been belittled before and have carried that pain for too long. When you understand this, you will see that emotions do not come to torment you. They come to free you. They tell you where it still hurts, where it is still lacking, where it needs to be touched with truth instead of avoidance. And the most important question Jung wants you to ask when emotion surges is, who in my past does this reaction really belong to? Because when you ask that question, you are no longer the one being swept away by emotion. You become the observer. And in the role of observer, you reclaim control. An emotional surge is a call. That call is not meant to drag you into chaos. It invites you to look directly at the part you have long lived with, but never known by name. And only when you enter that journey will you see that every reaction, whether fierce or vague, contains a truth waiting for you to open. Part 2. The art of not reacting. Stepping out of the emotional storm. Now that you have seen how the unconscious operates in each of your reactions, Jung leads you one level deeper. No longer just noticing what triggers your emotions, but learning how to stand firm in front of the very wave itself. This is where the art of not reacting begins to emerge as a central skill in the journey of inner growth. The art of not reacting is not coldness, nor is it about suppressing emotions until they turn into a lump in your chest. It is a very different kind of strength. the strength of someone who can remain clear and awake at the exact moment when an inner storm wants to break out. Jung believed that most of human suffering does not come from circumstances, but from the fact that people lose their inner authority precisely when they need it most. You do not lose because emotions appear. You only lose when you let emotions act in your place. And here an important Jungian principle appears. Reacting immediately is the instinct of the unconscious, while not reacting is the choice of a psychologically mature person. When you pause, even for a brief moment, the entire way the mind operates changes. You no longer speak from old memories, no longer act from old wounds, no longer defend yourself by old habits. You begin to see everything from a higher point, the point of the observer. For Jung, that moment is the beginning of individuation, when the ego starts to separate from the unconscious shadows that have been driving you from within. You can see this most clearly in very ordinary situations. One follower of the channel shared that his wife always snapped at him whenever he stepped into the house after work. If he did not immediately pick up the child or did not do exactly what she wanted, she would complain right away. Her voice would come out quickly, sharp and heavy. At first, he reacted instantly, feeling irritated, defensive, attacked, and disrespected. Any small conversation could turn into an unnecessary argument, but one evening, just before responding, he stopped. That pause was long enough for him to notice her red eyes from lack of sleep, milk stains on her shirt, the messy house, and their crying child who had not yet settled down. He realized how exhausted she had been all day, and he understood she was not angry at him. She was simply too tired to have any energy left for gentleness. When he did not react, the whole atmosphere changed. Not because he held it in, but because he saw the essence of the situation, instead of seeing it only through his own wound. According to Jung, that moment marks the time when the ego steps out of unconscious inertia and moves into the position of the observer. From that vantage point, everything becomes different. Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." What irritates you in others is the doorway into your own interior. When you do not react immediately, you are opening that door instead of slamming it shut. Not reacting does not mean forcing yourself into silence or pretending to be calm. It is the moment you gently step out of the stream of instinct and stand at a higher point to watch it. Jung often used the image of water to describe emotion. If you stand in the middle of the current, the water can sweep you away. But if you stand on the bank, you still see the water, still understand its direction. Only now it cannot drag you along. Where you stand inside yourself determines everything. Think about the times you lost control when someone said the wrong thing, when a child spilled a glass of water, when work did not go according to plan. You did not react because the event was too big. You reacted because inside you was already so full that just one extra drop was enough to overflow the cup. And that moment of reaction rarely has to do only with the present. It often echoes an old memory. A time you were belittled, scolded, made to feel small. A time no one was on your side. The anger does not come from the moment happening now. It comes from the moment that was never healed. When you pause, you allow yourself to see that before it turns into action. You realize that you are not just facing the person in front of you, but also facing your own past. This is the deepest nature of the practice of not reacting. You see the wound before it becomes words. Jung called this the first step of individuation. The step in which you separate from the unconscious contents that have quietly controlled you. Only when you recognize that you are being pulled can you choose not to be pulled anymore, and that choice, which seems small, opens a new version of you. To practice this in the simplest way, tomorrow morning when emotion starts to rise, your breath quickens, your voice is about to burst out, your chest heats as if someone has touched an old wound. You only need to pause for a few seconds. No need to explain, no need to argue, no need to act calm. Just take one slow breath and ask quietly, does what I am feeling belong to this moment, or is it an echo of something that has happened before? If you can ask that question, you have already moved out of the role of the reactor into the role of the observer. And in the role of observer, you take back control gently but firmly, quietly yet profoundly. And when these things touch you, take a moment to share your own reflection in the comments. It may be just a fleeting thought, a small inner stir, or a recognition about yourself. The act of naming that experience is already a step into the stillness of the soul where reaction gives way to choice. Part 3. Entering the darkness. Observing, naming and transforming the wound. Then a natural question will arise within you. If I already know how to pause and not react, what truly lies beneath those reactions? That is when the journey leads you one step further into the darkness, where the most intense emotions are born and where old wounds are still quietly speaking. There are times in life when you react too strongly to something very small. And even though your rational mind knows that it is not worth being sad or angry about, the emotion still swells like a wave you cannot hold back. This is the moment Jung called the rising of the darkness, not to threaten you but to demand to be seen. In the depth of his analytical psychology, every excessive reaction is rooted in an old hurt, a repressed memory, or a part of the self that has been judged and pushed into silence. Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And sometimes, only when emotions flare up without warning, a very old sense of being wronged, an unreasonable anger, a feeling of abandonment even when no one has left. Do you understand that the light he speaks of is not something you create by willpower, but something that appears when you dare to look into the darkest parts of yourself? Jung called these regions shadow, the part of the psyche that has been pushed into darkness because it was criticized, rejected, or hurt. Shadow does not disappear. It merely lies still, waiting for the right signal to rise. And when it appears through an intense emotion, it is not your failure. It is the opportunity to see clearly what you have long tried to avoid. One of the most representative stories of the journey into the darkness is that of Oprah Winfrey. Although she became one of the most powerful women in the world, she once admitted that for many years, just a mild criticism was enough to make her feel as if her entire worth collapsed. Others could not understand why she was so sensitive. But Oprah understood that pain did not belong to the present. It belonged to a wounded childhood, poverty, abuse, being looked down upon, being forced to be strong while still too young. Each criticism in the present was only a key opening the old door of memory. She was not reacting to the words of the person in front of her. She was reacting to the inner child, the one who had never been protected, and precisely when she realized that Oprah truly began her healing journey. Her story reveals an important truth. We can only transform what we are brave enough to look at directly. Strong emotions do not exist to hurt you. They lead you to the exact place you need to touch where the darkness is waiting for the light of awareness. In Jung's view, when a reaction is far greater than necessary, it is a sign that the present event is linked to a chain of old memories. In that moment, the ego can no longer distinguish between now and long ago. Everything overlaps, making you act from instinct instead of consciousness. And it is precisely at this point that the journey into darkness begins. Observing emotion honestly, naming the wound it connects to, and gradually restructuring your entire reaction pattern. To picture this journey more easily, imagine walking into an attic where old objects have been piled up over the years. During the day, it is quiet, but just one gust of wind at night will make those objects rub against each other and create sounds that startle you. Those sounds are not new. They are simply the voices of things that have been there for a long time. Emotions are like that. When the present brushes against old memories, they produce sounds that you are forced to hear. Not to scare you, but to remind you that in that attic there are things that have reached the time to be cleared out. So what should we do when the darkness rises? The first step is to observe. Do not fight. Do not force yourself to be calm immediately. Just stand still and watch. The second step is to name the emotion. I am sad. I am afraid. I feel disrespected. Naming in this way immediately shifts you from reaction to awareness. And once you are aware, you regain control. The next step is to return to the first memory that the emotion leads you to. Do not try to analyze right or wrong. Just let the image appear naturally. It might be a scene in which you were yelled at as a child, a scene of being abandoned, a scene where you held back tears because no one was listening. That memory does not show up to hurt you more. It shows up to be healed. Finally, you rewrite the old belief. If you once believed I am not good enough, try replacing it with I have value even when I am not perfect yet. If you once thought I must always be strong, change it to I am allowed to be vulnerable. Each time you change a belief, the emotional structure inside changes along with it, and the darkness gradually becomes an integrated part of you rather than a terror. Jung believed that darkness is not an enemy. It is a door. Only when you step into it with awareness do you truly see your real essence. Healing does not happen when you run away from pain. It happens when you dare to place your hand on it and say, I see you. If you feel this section touches something in your heart, take it as a sign that you are ready to take one more step on your healing journey. And if you want to continue walking alongside deep content about Jung, about emotions and darkness, click like or subscribe so you do not miss the next part of this journey. Part 4. The Power of Silence. When you no longer need to react. After you have gone through the journey of recognizing emotions, observing the darkness, and understanding how your inner workings function, you will reach a very special phase. You no longer react to everything the way you once did, not because life has become less harsh, nor because people around you have suddenly become kinder, but because within you, a different place to stand has formed. This is exactly the state in which the storm is still there, but you are no longer swept away by it. As Jung once said, the greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. Emotions are the same. You cannot solve them all, but you can grow beyond them. And silence in the Jungian sense is the sign that you have begun to grow larger than what once controlled you. In life, everyone has met people who are very difficult to shake. Not the cold, emotionally frozen type, but those who possess a quiet steadiness. Others may misunderstand, judge, or even attack them. Yet they do not rush to justify themselves, do not try to argue, and do not always respond to everything for the sake of setting things straight. From the outside, we might think that is indifference. But through Jung's lens, it is a sign that the ego has become less dependent on other people's eyes and has begun to cooperate with something deeper within, what he called the self, the center of one's true nature. When you no longer need anyone's validation to feel your own worth, you become far less easily offended. To clarify, let us look at a situation that both you and I often encounter, being spoken to harshly. In an unconscious state, you react instantly, becoming angry, attacking back, or withdrawing into yourself. In a state of self-possession, you will pause and ask, is this statement really about me or about their pain? Once you separate these two, you are free. You can see that their reaction is only the burden they are carrying, not the truth about you. When you see this, silence becomes a strength, not endurance, but choice. Someone once said, you are controlled by what you constantly fight against. Jung would agree. The more you strive to react, the more power you hand over to what triggers you. The more you remain silent at the right time, the more you reclaim that power. Silence is not avoidance. It is a declaration. I will not let the past or impulsive emotions decide my actions. In Jungian thought, the state of no longer needing to react indicates that the ego has stopped desperately trying to protect its own image. In the past, every criticism could shake you because the ego feared being hurt, feared being looked down on, feared losing its place in the eyes of others. But when you begin to work with the shadow, to look directly at the fear of not being enough, to face memories of being belittled, compared, denied. Gradually, you no longer need the outer world to prove the opposite to you. You do not need anyone to say you are okay in order to know that you are okay. From there, silence is no longer a strained endurance, but a lack of need to join the game of winning and losing, right and wrong, of the ego. A friend of mine shared that on his way home from work, a man suddenly bumped his shoulder hard and shouted, "Watch where you're going." Normally, he would have reacted immediately, getting angry, arguing back, or carrying the irritation for the entire evening. But that day, amidst the traffic noise, he paused for just a moment and looked closely at the man. The tense face, the backpack clutched tightly to his chest, the posture of someone going through a difficult day. Realizing that, his anger quickly softened. He simply nodded and walked on, not allowing that moment to pull him into someone else's emotional field. He said that for the first time, he truly felt what it meant to preserve his own peace just by 1 second of stopping before reacting. Jungian silence is not muting your feelings. You still feel pain, can still be sad, disappointed, and uncomfortable. But instead of letting emotion command your words and actions, you use awareness to hold them. You understand, I am in pain, but I am not this pain. I am angry, but I am not this anger. Applied to daily life, the power of silence shows itself in small but repeated choices, not arguing to the bitter end just to prove that you are right, because you know that sometimes the price of winning is losing your peace. Not explaining yourself to everyone about everything because you begin to believe that truth matters more than impressions. Not retaliating with harshness just because someone has hurt you because you do not want to become a copy of what once wounded you. This is not weakness or sacrifice. It is a very still kind of strength. The strength of someone who knows who they are and no longer needs to keep proving it. At this point, you may ask then, how do I begin to live with the power of silence instead of merely understanding it in theory? You do not need a huge change in one go. Just one small practice, repeated many times, is enough to reset how you face emotions. Tomorrow morning, choose one moment in the day when you are most easily triggered. Maybe when stuck in traffic, when you receive an upsetting message, when you hear a comment that stings. When it happens, instead of reacting by habit, take one step back inside yourself and ask, if I do not respond right now, do not justify immediately. Do not react at once. What will happen? Only holding that question for a few seconds already gives you a chance to experience the power of silence. Not silence to swallow everything, but silence to choose more carefully what truly deserves your energy. Because in the end, as Jungian wisdom always reminds us, no one lives your life for you, and no one bears the consequences of your reactions in your place. When you stop reacting unconsciously and begin to live with conscious silence, you are not only protecting yourself from temporary storms, you are also gradually becoming the kind of person whose inner world cannot be easily shaken by anything or anyone. And if you want to know how to nurture this steadiness day by day, stay, because the next part will open practices that help you enter the state in which nothing can easily throw you off balance. Part 5. Jungian practice, becoming the person no one can easily shake. And if you have come this far, your inner journey has opened up a new territory where understanding alone is no longer enough. And only the choices you repeat day after day will shape who you become. At this threshold, Jungian practice begins to speak as an invitation to step into a deeper layer of inner maturity. The layer of action, of conscious repetition, of choosing yourself again and again. Jungian practice does not ask you to become someone without feelings, nor does it demand that you turn into an immovable rock in the middle of life. Its nature is much more subtle, learning to stand at a higher inner position where emotions are still present but no longer hold the right to control. From that place, you are not cold, you are clear. You are not tensed up, you are awake. You do not annihilate emotions. You simply refuse to let them become the ones that decide your actions. If the previous parts helped you understand why you react, what is operating in the unconscious, and which darkness is asking to be seen, then this part is the shift from knowing to living, from understanding to becoming. Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." And that choice, repeated in every moment, not ostentatious but persistent, is where a new person is born. In daily life, we are easily pulled into old reactions, a comment that makes you feel hit, a look that makes you uncomfortable, a sense of being belittled that makes you snap back on instinct. Those reactions are not bad habits. They are unconscious patterns still carrying the imprint of old memories. The unconscious is not malicious. It is just loyal to the story you once believed was true. When someone unintentionally touches an old wound you have carried, familiar defenses immediately surface. Anger, withdrawal, counterattack, or blame. But according to Jung, real maturity appears at the exact moment when you see yourself about to react and choose differently. Choosing to stand in a place inside that is no longer dragged around by old stories. Not because you strain to be calm, but because you no longer believe in the old pattern the way you used to. To understand what it means to choose yourself again, look at the journey of Lady Gaga. Being bullied in childhood shaped a deep fear in her about her own worth. A negative comment was enough to make her collapse. But then she changed her question from "what do they think of me" to "who do I want to become?" That moment, her ego stopped racing after other people's gaze and began to cooperate with a deeper center, the self. And that shift of orientation changed the entire way she existed in the world. Jungian practice in its purest form lies here. Freeing yourself from dependence on external illusions and returning to an inner place where no judgment can reach. From that position, attacks no longer have the same destructive force as before. Not because the world has become kinder, but because she has stopped letting the world define her value. The old wound no longer leads the way. It has been seen, named, and is beginning to heal. Once you understand this, you will clearly see why Jung said that real change does not come from trying to fix each small reaction, but from changing the vantage point within. When the vantage point shifts, your entire feeling, thinking, and behavior shifts. Merely recognizing the moment you are about to be swept away and pausing for a beat, even a very small one, is enough to alter the old current. That pause, which seems so fragile, is the light of consciousness where the real person begins to change. From here, the state of no one can easily shake you is not a goal you must strain to reach, but the natural result of countless small choices repeated every day. Today, you pause instead of arguing. Tomorrow, you take a breath instead of striking back. A week later, you realize you are no longer carried along by other people's emotions as easily as before. Not because the world has grown gentler, but because you have built within yourself a stable inner ground to return to. Imagine this journey as replanting your own roots. When roots grow deep, no matter how strong the wind blows, it cannot uproot you. Those roots are your recognitions. I know what inside me is being triggered. I understand why I react this way. I feel the anger rising, but I do not let it act in my place. Each time you manage that, the roots grow a bit more, and your vulnerability to being shaken lessens a bit. To step into practice in the gentlest way, you only need two things: awareness and choice. Awareness of what is happening inside, and the choice not to let it lead you. You do not need a complex technique. You do not need a long ritual. You only need one small question at the right moment. If I choose peace instead of instinct right now, what will change? That question does not force you to swallow your feelings, does not push you to pretend to be calm. It simply opens another door, the door of someone who is leaving the old pattern and moving toward their own light. And sometimes, just one such choice is enough to change your entire emotional trajectory. When you walk this path long enough, you will understand that steadiness does not arise from becoming invulnerable. but from knowing yourself so thoroughly that you no longer need to fight. You do not need to be right to feel worthy. You do not need to be understood to feel safe. You do not need to react to protect the ego. You only need to stand in your inner truth, where worth does not come from other people's eyes, where peace does not come from circumstances, and where everything in life suddenly becomes lighter in a very natural way. And at that level of awareness, you begin to sense what Jung was always pointing toward. A person is not defined by what has hurt them, but by who they choose to become after everything. You step out of the old story. You stand upright in a new light. You are not someone without emotions. You are someone who cannot be easily shaken because you know the way back to yourself whenever the world becomes too loud. When you reach the end of this journey, you will see that true power does not lie in reacting quickly, but in your ability to pause before the unconscious pulls you along. That is the core energy of the power of not reacting, the power of not letting emotion control your fate. In Jung's spirit, inner freedom does not come from trying to suppress emotion, but from looking straight at it, understanding its origin, and choosing not to let old stories repeat themselves. When you do not react immediately, you open a small but crucial space. A space where consciousness can enter, where you choose the direction instead of being driven by instinct. You do not need to become icy to preserve your peace. You only need enough clarity to see that emotion is just a passing wave, while you, the deeper, stiller, clearer part, remain. And when you find that inner ground, no criticism, no momentary anger, no temporary upheaval can shake you as easily as before. That is the art of emotional control that Jung constantly emphasized. Control not by force but by awareness. If these reflections touch you, if you feel you are learning how to stand firm amid the fluctuations of emotion, share this video. Somewhere out there, there may be someone drowning in unconscious reactions without knowing how to get out. Your action may be the first door that leads them back to themselves. And now, as this journey comes to rest, let everything you've heard settle into the depths of your being, rising alone, letting go, understanding your reactions, all parts of one sacred journey, the journey home to yourself. Sleep now, knowing that, in the darkness, transformation continues. And when you wake, you will carry this wisdom woven into the fabric of who you are becoming. Rest, release, and trust. The night sea journey continues.